Welcome, everyone. I see that I'm starting to see all these names pop up. That's great. Well, welcome. I'm Rick Bushnell, and I'm the chair of the Science Committee, or what used to be called the Science Committee, and now we call ourselves the Stewardship Committee at the Foundation of the Arts and Sciences. And on behalf of the LBIF, I want to welcome everyone. I want to thank Daniela Kerner, the executive director, for facilitating these sessions, and Jenna and Kate, who are the LBI staff who actually make these things happen. So I want to thank all those people. And as I've said in the past, please consider supporting the foundation either through membership or just participating in some of the many activities that they have. Their summer catalog is about to come out. They've started accepting registrations for camp. So if you have friends, neighbors, relatives, anybody who have kids, they have a terrific camp. And in fact, Ben's going to be doing a couple weeks of camp at the foundation this summer. So so our speaker today, you're going to see more of him. Want to also remind everyone that we will be using the chat session. So please, if you have questions, put them in the chat. If there's something particularly poignant, I will be monitoring them, and I could interrupt Ben to answer a question or two, perhaps during the session, but otherwise we'll save our questions to the end. And as we've always been saying, everything is connected. And if we're going to be good stewards of our environment, we should have some idea of all the different things that live in it and fly over it, as in the case today, and then use that knowledge to better understand how we can participate in improving our environment and taking care of our environment, and then teaching others to do those things. So that's kind of my little goal for today, is to help everyone understand that recreation and enjoyment of the environment is the best medicine for the environment, and it's great for us humans as well. So today we've got our speaker is Ben Wurst, and some of you have probably heard Ben speak before, and many of you may have even met him. He is Mr. Osprey, as far as I'm concerned. He's also the father of the nature trail that leads from the foundation out to the marsh. It was some time ago that we'd created the trail out on the marsh, but Ben stepped in with many volunteers and worked diligently over the years to maintain the pathway so that you can walk all the way out to the marsh. And then he constructed the Osprey blind so that you can see the ospreys that are out on our marsh. So we want to thank you very much for all your efforts, Ben, over the years. So I'm going to turn things over to Ben right now. Take it away, Ben.
All right, great. Yeah, thanks a lot, Rick. I got started working with LBIF through Ospreys. They had Ospreys nesting behind their property in Loveladies. And, I'm sure you remember, Rick, the one nest was not occupied. And, we were wondering why it wasn't being used and whether it was, people walking out on the marsh walkway. But really, it was the location of the nests, right? Once we put it out closer to the water, then we finally got birds. And, now there's 3 pairs of ospreys that nest behind LBIF, which is pretty amazing, for such a small little area. But yeah, I'm going to start sharing my screen here, and I could bring up my presentation. So just bear with me one second.
While you're doing that, I'll just mention that,
yeah,
that people who have been to the foundation, there's an observation platform that you can climb the stairs right at the science building, and from there you can see the osprey nests, and you can see a lot of other birds on the marsh as well. So you don't have to go actually out onto the marsh or follow the trail. You can do it just from the observation deck.
Yeah, and the marsh cam too. So you could be sitting in the comfort of your couch or your kitchen table and check out the osprey or the osprey nest via the marsh cam at LBIF too, which is also pretty awesome. But yeah, so today, I've given osprey talks at LBIF before, both in person and virtually. And today, I kind of altered my previous talk to talk more about, obviously ospreys, but also, monitoring them in our current age here, where it's been 50 years since they were first listed as endangered. So we've kind of pivoted now to really, engage the public in their, both management and conservation long term. So I'm going to talk all about ospreys, of course, today, and also really drive home the how you can get involved. And at some point, which I'm going to have to keep track here, but around like 11:30, I'm going to have my good friend Jim Verhagen, or Northside Jim, join me, who is with the Little Egg Foundation, and currently he is overhauling the Osprey Watch website, which is a critical tool for us to use to collect data on osprey nest activity in New Jersey and also worldwide too. It's a really awesome tool. So just a little bit about me. So this was fun putting this together. I've worked with ospreys now in New Jersey for close to 20 years. So that's where I started out, working for New Jersey Fish and Wildlife in the Endangered Species Program. Simply, straight out of college, looking for a seasonal job. So I worked with many different species from the get-go, from monitoring Delaware Bay for horseshoe crab egg density, to southern gray tree frogs, and forest nesting hawks in New Jersey, and ospreys. And that's where ospreys are a species, I guess you could say, I kind of fell in love with, both as a fisherman and a woodworker, and someone who loves the coast. So that's where, over the years, I've worked with ospreys, and with Conserve Wildlife Foundation, who I work for now, basically working for a nonprofit allows me to bring in my own funding to support ospreys. Because what I saw when working for the state government was that there wasn't a lot of money. And that's the case with many endangered species or non-game programs in state governments, is that they don't get tax revenue, dedicated to their work or their programs like other agencies. So that's where they have to kind of be creative, where they look for grants, both from the federal government and other revenue sources. And Conserve Wildlife, we're able to bring in that funding to help support work on species like this. So that's where ospreys are one of those that I really, fell in love with and saw a need, where nest platforms that are placed for them in salt marsh habitats away from disturbance was really one of the focal points that I did. And over the years, I've installed close to 250 nest platforms for ospreys. So all about ospreys. I mean, they're kind of an unmistakable bird this day and age, especially along the coast of New Jersey. I mean, I say that as a raptor biologist, but I think it's hard to really go to the beach during the summer months and not see an osprey. At least that's what I see when I go to the beach. But of course, you have to kind of know what to look for. But they're a large migratory bird. They have a wingspan that's about 5 feet. So you could see how they're light from below like this, except for their flight feathers. And females are larger than males. And you could see they have that telltale dark eye stripe. And of course, if they're carrying a fish, then they're carrying that fish head first as well. So like I said, females are larger than males. And you can see here, just by these two individuals, not only the sexual dimorphism that we see here with the female being larger and also having that brown necklace of feathers. But I also just want to point out, which is really pretty cool when you look at these birds, of just how big their eyes are, especially with the male who's on the left. And when you see them in flight, of course, you can see their light body, their long legs, and their darker flight feathers, both in their tail and wings, and that dark wrist area, which pretty much almost always leads. And that's one way to really tell the difference between an osprey and say like a bald eagle, which they could possibly be confused with, but their wings are almost always bent like this. And this bird, so this is a bird that I banded as a nestling, 91M. I actually resighted this bird last year at LBIF, just when I happened to be back at the blind on the marsh there. And this bird we've never seen before. And you can see how close it was from where it was actually banded. Very close, less than 3 miles. And we do not know where this bird is nesting yet, but having bands like this allow us to be able to identify this bird when it's alive and then determine where it originated from, how old it is, and all sorts of other really great stuff, especially once they become associated with the nest and are nesting there. So this was just like one of those things where it's like, I better have my camera on me because any osprey flying over could have a red band. So really pretty cool. But continuing about ospreys here, so of course they're, they build large stick nests where they raise young. And during the nesting season, which ospreys right now are migrating north back to their breeding areas in North America, including here in New Jersey. And females pretty much are found on their nest throughout the entire nesting season until maybe like, mid to late July. So that's primarily where you'll see nesting females. So that's how it's a little bit easier to tell who's who, where males are the ones who are foraging more. So they're seen off nests, perched nearby, maybe feeding after a successful hunt. And this is because females do around 70% of the nest duties, including incubation and brooding and feeding of young, where the males do 100% of the foraging, unless something really terrible is happening where they can't find food and the females have to go out and forage for themselves, or they're not associated with a nest. But yeah, so ospreys, I mean, you can see with this individual here too, this is a female. You can see that necklace of brown feathers there, and she's carrying a very large Atlantic menhaden, which is one of their primary prey species. And you can see this bird is definitely getting a workout from carrying that fish head first over the beach. And that's where this picture was captured right in North Beach by Northside Jim, who will be joining us a little bit later. But ospreys, I mean, they nest in many different locations throughout the state on many different structures. They'll nest almost anywhere and on anything that's gives them protection from predators and is away from human disturbance. Like this is a abandoned commercial fishing boat that was down in Wildwood. But of course, they love nesting on platforms, which are designed specifically for them. And many were placed in locations where we get a great view of them as well, too. And that's how many of them were installed in the first place. People want to help ospreys, and they install nest platforms for them behind their homes along the coast, and ospreys took to those. And where you'll also see them, of course, is up on the beach where they do forage a lot, and is now my new favorite location to go and look for red-banded ospreys, because we'll see a lot of them there where they're foraging right out at the beach, in the surf, or in the ocean, again, where they find their primary prey. And now we're seeing more and more ospreys also nest in other locations where there might not be an actual tall structure like a utility pole or a platform, but they nest on any kind of debris, including trees or down trees on salt marsh habitat as well. So this is a nest that's over behind High Bar, which is really pretty awesome to see firsthand. And these nests can be successful as well too, which is also really, really amazing. And this is the nest too. So this is the view you would see from LBIF from the Osprey blind, which is still even up. I decided to leave it up this whole winter, and a couple times I was kind of regretting that when I was watching how flooded the marsh was back there, and ducks swimming right next to the blind, and but it is still standing, so that is a good thing. But it's really just a great location for anyone to go and observe ospreys and learn more about them through direct observations. I mean, that's where I can say, from working with them over the past 20 years, I've learned a lot just from watching them, not only in person, but also on Osprey cams as well that are live online. So ospreys, along the coast too, there are some other species which they can be confused with, and those include bald eagles. People from outside the area who aren't familiar with seeing ospreys might confuse them with them. But of course, eagles are much larger, and they're pictured on the left here with that white head that you can kind of see, and the white tail, where ospreys have a dark tail. And then on the right, where we have a black-backed gull, where they're around the same size as you can see here with this male. And in both of these situations, this is where we're witnessing kleptoparasitism. And I really wasn't I really didn't even know about that until I worked with ospreys in Belize, where that was a real critical factor in seeing where a different subspecies of ospreys called the Ridgway osprey nest, where they avoid areas where there's frigate birds, where they parasitize ospreys for their food. And that's basically what that is. So that's where another bird parasitizes another one for their prey. So they basically chase them until they drop that prey, and then they steal it from them. And we see this a lot with ospreys all throughout the world. And really, ospreys are just a more efficient predator than I think both of these other species that they compete with. And that's where they're able to go and just go and catch another fish if someone steals the first fish that they caught. So continuing with ospreys here, I got to keep track of time. All right, doing good. All right, so they're global species. So there are 4 different subspecies of ospreys. The ospreys that we have in North America are the North American ospreys. So they're the Carolinensis subspecies, and they're highly migratory. So they're found all throughout North America. They nest in, from the east to the west coast, and they're found even in Canada. And they winter in southern locations, and our ospreys pretty much winter in northern South America. So that's where the largest concentration of ospreys are found during the winter months. And in the Western Hemisphere, there's actually no nesting of ospreys that occurs in South America, even though it holds the largest concentration of ospreys. They don't breed there at all. And the other subspecies, which I even mentioned before, which is found in the Western Hemisphere, is the Ridgway. And they're found in the Caribbean and into Belize. And that's where they're non-migratory. So they do not take long distance migration like our ospreys. So in New Jersey, though, our ospreys, they nest along the entire coast. They kind of define our waterways, being a water state, where our boundaries are defined by water, both the Delaware River, the Hackensack, and both the Atlantic Ocean, and then Delaware Bay. And you can see ospreys pretty much line the entire coast of New Jersey. And their range is slowly expanding inward as well to other sites inland, both in central Jersey and northern New Jersey as well. But yeah, so that's where, right on Long Beach Island, there are several nests that you can see, all the way from Barnegat Light down to Beach Haven that are located on the island, which is really pretty cool because when I started working with them, there weren't that many ospreys nesting on Long Beach Island. So ospreys being a predatory bird, their prey is fish. They're specially adapted to find and catch this prey item. And as I said, their eyes are very large for their body size. They have more photoreceptors to be able to identify fish in the water column. And that's where, they're also able to perceive ultraviolet light, which helps them see fish through the water column as well, specifically bottom feeding fish like flounder, which is also a common prey item, especially in back bay habitats or our estuaries. And, otherwise, they have very long legs, which, they use to dive into water with, feet first, and very sharp talons and spicules on their feet, which is like very rough sandpaper, which allowed them to hold on these very slippery fish. And it's really pretty cool where they can reverse and oppose one toe to the other toes, where they help them carry the fish head first. So that's where all predatory birds pretty much have 3 toes forward and 1 back, where the osprey with their outer toe, if I could just break my finger here and turn it around, it has 2 toes forward and 2 toes backward, which we see more with parrots. And that gives them the ability kind of to grasp things better. And the same with ospreys, where then with them, they can carry fish head first, which is really pretty cool. And that just allows them to be able to carry bigger fish, longer distances, and, not be taxed by having, a fish that's sideways, like how an eagle would carry a fish. But they're, of course, a much bigger bird that can carry heavier prey items. So ospreys are specially adapted to catch fish, but we pretty much call them specialized generalists, where they eat almost anything they can catch. They're not picky eaters, so they'll eat almost any fish out there that we see, but primarily here in New Jersey in the early spring. So once ospreys come back, we see them forage more on freshwater fish and fish that are spawning, like river herring. And in the spring as well, too, in April, the state of New Jersey also stocks trout in many lakes, and ospreys, I know, hone in on this fish as well, too. But at our Osprey Cam in Barnegat Light, we record prey observations from Osprey Cam viewers, which is another really cool citizen science project that we have, where when the birds bring in a prey item, our camera operator grabs good images or adjusts the zoom to be able to look at that prey item, where then we identify it, and then viewers report that prey item, and we can look at what they're feeding on. And the majority of their prey is Atlantic menhaden, and then summer flounder as well. And then we have other prey species in between there, like white perch, even pufferfish we've seen, and many other species, bluefish, you name it. It's really pretty cool to see. But their diet varies throughout New Jersey and throughout the world as well. So their life cycle begins when they return. And as I said, ospreys are migrating north right now. So this is when birds are flying north. And a lot of them congregate at the northernmost extent of South America, and until they jump, to land masses, and they follow those on their northern migration. And once they arrive here, they return to the same nest site. So birds do mate for life, and they take separate vacations, which I love to say. But when they come back, so that's where they spruce up their nests, and they strengthen their pair bond with their mate. And if anyone has watched our Osprey Cam in Barnegat Light as well, so the female and male there have been together since 2019 or 2020, because we lost the original female at that nest. But the male, he's going to be 17 years old this year, Duke. So we can't wait to see if he returns to reform his pair bond with the female. And he pretty much does that by performing aerial displays, which we call the sky dance, which you can see on the picture on the right in the screen here. And that's where he does that to strengthen his pair bond with the female. Basically, he's showing off, where they do a high undulating flight over a nest, sometimes with prey or after a successful hunt. And then after that, they can copulate, and they do that multiple times until egg laying begins, which is usually in late April. And that's where the female could lay up to 3 eggs, sometimes 4. And, one of the things I've seen, and I've kind of learned from watching Osprey cams as well, too, is, it's not just about, the male showing up at a nest, but it's him providing for the female. So one of the things that we've seen even in Barnegat Light is where we've had other younger males come in before Duke returns. He's the one who's like the old experienced male, where he just shows up late to the party, but knows that it's his nest and he's comfortable there. Where other males come in and they are unsure, they're trying to form a pair bond with this female, but they don't really know how to do it. And the way to do it is providing food. And Duke, when he returns, he just knows he doesn't mess around. He's just straight back to the nest, going and catching fish, and then he's sharing it with his mate. And that's where, when they form this pair bond, they establish that, where the male has that role of providing food for the female, because when she, is caring for those eggs by incubating them and keeping them warm and then feeding young, the male is the one who needs to, step up and provide food for everyone in this situation. And it's really pretty cool with cameras like that at nests, how you can really witness this firsthand. So I'm going to keep plugging the Barnegat Light Osprey Cam throughout my entire talk. So I hope that everyone tunes in. It's going to be an awesome season. I can't wait. But yeah, so when young hatch after eggs are incubated for a little over 36 days along the coast, the young are they hatch in the order that they're laid, which is called asynchronous hatching. But when they do hatch, they're semi-altricial, which means that they're downy and they can see, but they need very close parental care. They won't survive if they're not kept warm by the adults or fed by the adults. So the fate of the nest really depends on the adults and their ability to care for these young. If they're inexperienced, then the chances of the young surviving diminish. But the young grow very quickly. So that's where in around 2 months or 4 or 8 weeks, they're fledging and they're taking their first flights, where then they leave on migration, where they'll stay on their wintering areas for the next 2 years. And then they return to their natal areas to nest as adults. But the young develop very, very quickly, though. So that's where they eat about half their body weight every single day. And as they grow, their body feathers emerge out of a downy kind of look. And that's where you see here, these young are about a week and a half old to 2 weeks. And I call this the pterodactyl stage, where, they look reminiscent of their ancient ancestors, where, they're starting to lose these downy feathers and their body feathers are emerging from pin and they look very prehistoric, where then they get to be 3 weeks old, where then their body feathers are coming out more to replace their downy feathers, which give them really great cryptic coloration in nests, as you can see that this one. But then they start to, look out of their nests and look around at their surroundings and pay more attention to other things outside of their immediate nest, because their vision is also getting much better as well. And of course, then when they're about 4 or 5 weeks, they're starting to look more like an adult osprey, besides just having more buff feather tips and orange eyes. And then when they get to be 7 or 8 weeks is when they're about the age of being able to fly. And that's where they look much more like an adult osprey, and they're the same size. I've had many people over the years say, oh, it's a baby because it's smaller. No, they're the same size as an adult when they fletch. More than likely, it could just be a male as opposed to a female. And once they do fledge, this is where they can get into trouble, because as you can see here, this is a bird that one of my friends found on the Causeway Bridge, who originated from a nest on a channel marker just north of the Causeway Bridge, who, again, we banded with the red auxiliary band. And he wound up on the edge of the bridge, and he didn't know how to take off from there. Because you could just imagine, this is one of those days when the south winds were kind of howling. And, when you think about this bird, or just flight in general, planes and birds like to fly, or they fly better into the wind, or they have better control. And this bird just didn't know how to take off without having that wind going right there, head on, and it landed there and it got stuck. So that's where even this picture was by Northside Jim here, who went and grabbed the bird, and then we released it down on the marsh nearby because it was uninjured, but we were just afraid after hearing about him sitting there that he might possibly fly into traffic. So that's where we released him down in Mud City in Stafford, which is great. And we're waiting to see if 07M ever shows up again here. So we're waiting to see that, but hopefully he will. So kind of taking a step back here, continuing on, I'm going to try and run through this pretty quickly, but this is just talking more about the history of ospreys in New Jersey and their decline. So overall, ospreys were once very numerous, where we probably had more ospreys than we have right now, but their population fell just from overall persecution, habitat destruction, and then eventually the use of pesticides like DDT, which caused the population to decline from over 500 nesting pairs to only 50 pairs. So this really was exacerbated after World War II, when development was really going full speed ahead along the coast. We did not have a Wetlands Act. We did not have a Clean Water Act or a Clean Air Act. So, a lot of places were, being destroyed. Habitat was being lost at a exponential rate. And here in New Jersey, ospreys had the highest concentrations of DDT because, as you can imagine, we built houses all over the coast of New Jersey along salt marshes or filled salt marshes, and we found that, hey, this is prime habitat for mosquitoes. And what would we do to combat the mosquitoes? Well, we'd spray DDT. Well, that had a really disastrous effect on many birds, and this was highlighted in Rachel Carson's book, Silent Spring, where ospreys, peregrine falcons, bald eagles were all kind of highlighted of being in decline. I mean, eagles, their population declined to only one nesting pair in New Jersey, and peregrine falcons were federally listed as endangered, and they were totally extirpated east of the Mississippi. So that's where, once the Endangered Species Conservation Act passed and the Endangered Species Act, here in New Jersey, ospreys were listed as endangered in 1973, but DDT was also banned and their use declined, and slowly things started to improve for ospreys. But it wasn't until this Osprey Recovery Project began, where biologists worked with other partners, including USGS and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and even the Peregrine Fund, on innovative transplant programs. And this is where osprey eggs or young were taken from nests in other areas like the Chesapeake, and they were brought here and placed into New Jersey nests which contained contaminated eggs. The hope was that ospreys, it would jumpstart their reproductive success, and it did. The first couple of years that they did it, these were like the first years that young even fledged from nests in New Jersey, which is really an amazing story. And there's some great videos that we even have on YouTube showing this project, which is really pretty cool. So, but throughout the past 50 years that ospreys have been listed, and work on them has helped them recover. So one of the things that was done besides transplanting those eggs or young was installing alternative nest sites, and that was artificial nest platforms. And this is where the state of New Jersey partnered with other agencies or companies, like utility companies who had the resources and experience installing telephone poles in a salt marsh ecosystem. And that's where these were providing, new places for ospreys to nest, where historically places where they did nest, like in trees on barrier islands, were destroyed. And slowly their productivity increased, and ospreys were starting to come back, and their population was growing, and their reproductive success was increasing, and the population rebounded to 100 pairs by the mid 1980s, and their status was upgraded to threatened. And I remember as a kid, because I grew up in Stafford, I don't really remember seeing ospreys as a kid, and this is why. But today, kids growing up can go to the beach and you'll see ospreys on the entire 18 miles of Long Beach Island, which is pretty amazing.
And Ben, what's the population today?
Oh yeah, I mean today, we're at over 800 nesting pairs.
Fantastic.
So that's my next slide. What? It's 11:30.
By the way, it's 11:30. If you're.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah, that's it. If Jim's here, I'm sure he's listening too. We're getting close to Osprey Watch, but yeah. So that's where, today ospreys are doing quite well. I mean, like I said in the beginning too, we're seeing them nest more on the ground. So we have over 800 nesting pairs that we have all throughout the state. They're flourishing all along the coast where the majority of the population nests. But really, maintaining these nest platforms that we have for them is really crucial to maintain a stable population. Because as we've seen, even over the last couple of years, if anyone follows our work, is that, they've had the worst reproductive success over the last 2 years because of severe weather. And this is where we've had nor'easters hit the coast in both May and June now, where both have caused widespread brood reduction, where we see young, they don't survive to fledge because of reduced availability of prey. or the lack of prey for them to survive, which is kind of sad to watch and have to deal with. But nature is definitely cruel for sure. And we watched this play out at the Barnegat Light Osprey Cam as well. Last year they hatched 3 young, but once this nor'easter hit the area in mid-June, the male Duke, who was 16 years old, disappeared for 72 hours, and no food was brought into the nest. So that's where the female lost 2 of her young. And then once he returned, but even before he did return, she did forage eventually and was able to catch prey. But there were several days where they did not bring any food into the nest. And this happened all throughout the coast of New Jersey, especially in more of the southern locations of the coast. So it's really interesting to see how this is affecting ospreys. And these cameras like this are really a great way of shedding this light onto them as well. So as Rick even mentioned there, so here's results from last year. We recorded over 800 nests throughout New Jersey. So that produced, or 657 nests, which we knew the outcome of, produced 762 young, which is still a lot. And their productivity rate, which is 1.16, which is a measure of the health of the population, is still good. It might not be as good as what it was in a couple previous years, but it still allows them to maintain a stable population, which is what we want to see. So threats to ospreys, I usually show tons of pictures of this just to really drive it home, but what we see with ospreys, is them being an indicator species. So that's where they indicate the health of our environment because they're a top tier predator. So not only, with, pesticides and other contaminants that we find in the ecosystem, we can find them in osprey eggs that do not hatch. But they're, the levels of these are not at a rate that's affecting their, productivity. So, like levels of lead and mercury are not high enough right now to affect their, their ability to reproduce. But at some point in the future, they could. Or other contaminants like PFAS might as well too, but we don't know the long-term effects of that yet because it's such a new pollutant. But really, one of the things that we really see is really a big threat and does not show any kind of signs of slowing down is the persistent plastics that we find from both consumer debris and, whether it be, fishing debris with monofilament or line or rope. But some of the big ones are like ribbon from released balloons or plastic bags that can suffocate young as well. So what we do to manage ospreys today. So during the summer months, we go out and do surveys for ospreys where we conduct, studies, and we look at their overall activity at nests. So this is where we determine if nests are occupied by going out to nests and looking at them firsthand to see if there are adults on the nest or young in the nest. And this is where we have a group of volunteers to go out and do this by boat, or we use ladders. And we band young for future tracking if they are old enough to be able to be banded. And this is where, when we go up to a nest, of course, the adults, they are not happy. They fly around. I know that everyone's itching to ask the question of what I do and what they do. Well, that's where, we try to reduce disturbance at nests. So we do not spend a lot of time at nests to collect data or band young, but the adults, they fly around and they call to warn their young to play dead. And that's where they pretty much lay there. And banding occurs up at the nest primarily, where the young are covered with a white pillowcase that I use to keep them calm. And then when we do leave a nest, we leave fish there as well too, just to offset our disturbance. Because when I first started working with ospreys, I wasn't really given guidance on how to interact with adults and how to care for young. And now I'm more cognizant of reducing disturbance at nests because I don't want to see them. I don't want to see an angry osprey at all. But yeah, so young, a really great age for banding them is 3 to 4 weeks old, and that's where they're banded with both the federal band that's on the left here that you can see, the silver band, and then birds produced on nests on Barnegat Bay. We use a red auxiliary band, and this is part of our citizen science project, which we'll talk more about in a little bit. Where we look to get more resightings of birds when they're alive by reading these field readable bands. And alternatively, one of the things that I've used a lot in recent years is also a camera on a pole, which we could use to look at a nest and not have to climb with a ladder and increase disturbance at nests. So this is where we could run up, or in this case, that's my son holding a GoPro on an extension pole, where then I control the camera with my phone, where I could take a snapshot, and then we collect data on the nest, whether they have young, or as you can see here, there's eggs in that nest, and then get out of there and allow the birds to come back. And then, lastly, I am a FAA unmanned licensed pilot. So this is where I can use a drone or a UAS or UAV to be able to survey over osprey nests. And we started doing this really just to look at the same thing of reducing disturbance at nests and also collecting data. And this is where our hypothesis has basically been that if a drone is operated outside of the birds, disturbance area where they're disturbed, then they will not show any kind of interest or anything in the drone, and we're able to survey the nest and collect data and not disturb them at all too. And it has shown that as well too, which has been pretty awesome. So that's where Osprey Watch then is another tool that we've used over the past decade, since osprey nests in New Jersey were mapped online. And this is something that we did in 2013 after aerial surveys for ospreys were ended. And this was just a way for us to publicize every single osprey nest in New Jersey and be able to get the public to contribute to recording osprey nest observations and reporting activity online. And we'll have to see here, Rick, if Jim is here, if then we can allow him then to share his screen, or we can even unmute him. Let's see, can I even unmute him? But
yeah,
I'm here, Ben. I'm there.
How are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. Yeah.
Wonderful.
So Osprey Watch. So here I have Jim Verhagen with me with the Little Egg Foundation, who's currently overhauling the Osprey Watch website.
Yes, I'm
Stop
Jim.
sharing.
I'm Jim, and I've got a severe case of osprey fever. Yeah, my background was a tech entrepreneur, and in a midlife crisis, I was trying to get away from technology, and I discovered Osprey, met Ben, met a lot of great scientists working in New Jersey along the coast on Long Beach Island, and got away from it all and just absorbed myself in birds. Unfortunately, working with people like Ben, who are doing this amazing work and collecting so much data, I kept seeing, they now have more data than they're used to, and they can't keep track of it. And sadly, I had the solutions to those problems as a tech guy, and I found myself right back behind the computer screen. I'm here from Ithaca, New York right now. I have the foundation's Jack and Wendy here behind me to keep me company while I'm away. But anyway, I'm stuck behind the computer working with bird data. And long story short, about 7 years ago, I started working with people like Ben and with people over at Barnegat Light, with the plovers, working on a lot of big projects. I started to develop software for them, which has morphed into a whole data system, a way that scientists can collect data into a usable data set that they can use to run kind of high level calculus on, do analysis. And, you know, you just heard from Ben how much the population has exploded. And now he's trying to say, what was our productivity on 800 nests? Well, I see his numbers and I got one eyebrow up saying, how accurate are those numbers? And that's no offense to Ben. It's just, that's a lot of information to take care of. So we started the software that I built for my friend, started being used all over the world. It's called Nest Story. And we started a foundation on Long Beach Island, actually, the Little Egg Foundation, named in honor of the inlet where it all started. So that data system is being used all over the world in our Nest Story software. Cut to Osprey Watch. As Ben mentioned, the last couple of years has been catastrophic. And there's been some really bad population collapses, particularly like down in Maryland, the Chesapeake Bay. They had a lot of starvation events and things. And when Osprey Watch went to use the data that they had been collecting for the last 10 years, they realized that it wasn't sufficient for what they needed to do. And so luckily we connected, and now we're rebuilding the whole system for them. Hopefully some people on this call are interested in volunteering, and volunteer work is so important. When you have 800 nests, Ben can't watch them all. In the early days, you do anything you can just to get some osprey chicks hatched. And then when you have a couple hundred pairs, suddenly Ben can't handle them all. He needs more people watching. And that's great for a little bit. But now we have people all over New Jersey watching these nests. Some are putting up photos, some are putting up little stories. You know, we monitor, we volunteer, myself included, because we love these birds. Okay, so it's a nest near our house. That foundation, I named Jack and Wendy. You know, you're not supposed to do that, but I gave them names. I pretend I know what they're thinking, what they're feeling. We all do it, as you know, us who aren't involved in the science side of it, and it's wonderful. But what we're doing when we're there pretending that Jack and Wendy are having a fight or whatever we're doing, those observations, and I don't mean what you think, what you say, how many adults did you see? How many eggs did you see? How many chicks did you see? And on what date did you see them? Is the most important thing. So if every volunteer along the coast can have fun with the birds, but they can also check in once a week and just say, how many adults, how many eggs, how many chicks, you can know everything about the productivity of the individual nests. You can know everything about, you know, how the population's doing. And even beyond that, what we do at Little Egg Foundation is we have these large learning models now. We can finally start to map those things against weather patterns and all types of stuff that wasn't possible without humans. Can't do it. It's too time consuming, but computers can do it very easily. And we're on the cusp of an era where we can even be predictive. We can look at weather patterns and know what kind of effect it's going to have on the population in a month. And maybe there's places where we could take some preventative action. So the simplest data is the best way to help more osprey. So that's, you know, that's kind of my background introduction into what's going to change for those of you who are using Osprey already. That's really where we're going to get focused on. So should we take a sneak peek? Or is that enough?
Yeah, please do.
All right.
This is kind of fun, Jim. Last week, Amanda from JC Near unveiled a new feature in their MyCoast software. And so today you're unveiling, this is kind of like debut city here.
Yeah, debut city. I don't even know if I'm allowed to show this stuff, but I've been, since November, this has been my team and myself, this has been 7 days a week, 12-hour days. And we're racing. Every time Ben said that those ospreys are flying up the coast, I got a terrible feeling in the pit of my stomach, because we're close and this needs to launch. So I might as well show it.
One was reported at Foresight. in Atlantic County.
So I'm going to go ahead and share. I don't know if you need to give me permission.
I think you're there.
Got it. We're seeing it.
All right, great. So yeah, we'll just take a quick tour through checking some nests. We're going to explore the monitoring groups. Here are the groups. You can see the group boundaries all over the place. And here's New Jersey, the New Jersey Osprey Project. Let's take a look at Ben's group page. So yeah, by the way, New Jersey's phenomenal, and Ben is the greatest leader. New Jersey completely dominates Osprey Watch. In fact, through most of the development process, I log in as Ben. I've hijacked access to Ben's account. I use his nests, I use his followers because he's put together just a fantastic group. And it's probably the most active part of Osprey Watch, and I'm really really proud of that. So yeah, so here's the group, and when you're logged in, you can join Ben's group, and then it looks like I got logged out. So unfortunately, sorry everybody, I'm gonna have to log in real quick. Okay, great. So now I'm logged in and I'm a follower of Ben's group. So in Osprey Watch, you're going to want to join Ben's group, and then you'll have access to all of Ben's nests. So I'm a logged in member right now, and you can see all of Ben has 243 members in the New Jersey Osprey Project. It's a phenomenal amount of people, and I believe it's the largest group, which is great. But Ben also has too many nests. One of the big things that we've done is separate recently active nests from older nests, because nests move and platforms get destroyed, and you can see it on the map. All the orange ones are nests where data has been reported within the last couple of seasons, and all the yellow ones are ones we haven't heard from in a few years. So you can toggle those on and off in the map, and that was one of the big improvements that they needed. But yeah, that's it. So let's do a quick nest check just so you can kind of see what it's like for anybody who is used to just uploading photos and doing some little journals. Let's check a nest. We'll check this one. So yeah, first of all, time tracking. It's something that you can turn off, but it's really important. Everyone who volunteers to monitor, most people just don't realize how valuable that time is, because if we know how that you spent an hour a week, that added up to 8 hours over a season, times everybody along the coast, the thousands of people are doing this, we can actually quantify how big this volunteer effort is, how important it is. And that quantification allows unlocking sources of revenue for organizations like Ben's. The federal government really wants to know, how much time does this actually take? How valuable are these volunteers? And they're really valuable. In our Nest Story software, most of the organizations that get matches from the federal government, Bald Eagles, for example, the year they started using Nest Story, they increased their match by 30 to 50%. That means simply by people using software to report, volunteers, like some people on this call and myself, accurately reporting their time, resulted in tens of thousands of dollars going to these organizations to support their ability to help Ospreys and Eagles and build more platforms and do more work. So anyway, time tracking is really important. So let's launch a nest check. And this is it. It couldn't be more simple. When you're looking at the Osprey nest, even when you're naming them Jack and Wendy and making up stories about what the babies are doing, we want to know, we saw 2 adults. Next, negative data is really important. Eggs. Are there eggs or aren't there eggs? No. Are there young? No. Just this little bit of data, 2 no. And in our Nest Story algorithms, that translates into 200. And that 200 allows us to do analysis on literally millions of nests. So we'll record this check. And that's it. That's all you have to do a nest check. So let's launch another one. And let's say this day we see 1, and then for eggs, we're going to say yes. Now, when you're watching osprey nests, most of us can't see the eggs. If you're watching a cam, you most certainly can. So you can enter how many eggs you see on cam, not how many you think you see. If you know there's 3, but you can't see one of them, you never enter 3, you always enter 2. Again, this is a data perspective. It's very, very critical. That's what's important, is that you could see 2. But for most of us, we're at the foundation and we're looking from the blind, and we don't know how many eggs there are. So we say unknown. But the reason we know that we should check yes for eggs is we can see the adult incubating. We can see the female high in the nest. And Osprey Watch is going to provide lots of resources for how you can recognize an incubating bird. But if that happens, we just check incubation observed. And now we've got this piece of data. And in our data set, it looks like 1 UI. That's all we need to know. And we can perform analysis on millions of nests. So for the young, we say no, and we record the check. And we end it. And that's it. Now we'll return to the nest, let's say later in the season. And we see 2 eggs. We don't see any incubation, but now we see young. And just like with the eggs, sometimes you can see the young, sometimes you can't. But the way you would know that young are there would be you would observe a feeding. So if you observe a feeding but can't see any chicks, you would check unknown. And that, again, it seems like negative data never seems important to people who don't work with it, but it's so, so very important. Lastly, if you can see chicks, you would select the number that you can see. Again, not the number that you think is there, but the number that you see. And you would mark whether they're laying down in the nest bowl or they're standing erect, because that's the core indicator of age that's needed for productivity. So let's say they're lying down, and record the check, and that's it. And we'll return to the nest, and we'll take a look at what this looks like. So here's our activity log. This activity log down here is a log of each of the individual nest checks. So if there's 5 or 6 people checking, all of their information will be here. And it kind of gives you a little glimpse at it's a more human readable format of the data here. But essentially, this very, very simple, small amount of information, everything you could possibly want to know about the health of the osprey species will be known by this small little bit of data. And it's the most important thing. And then once you've got that in place, there's other stuff, and Osprey Watch users are more used to this. You can mark the date the adults arrived, or the eggs were laid, or the clutch hatched, and any other kind of, we call them seasonal milestones. But none of these things should ever not be supported by your individual nest checks. So that's it. That's a quick introduction and a sneak peek at the new Osprey Watch, how to think about data, how to realize that just these simple numbers and yes and no answers to what you saw on each visit will be absolutely transformative in understanding the species, protecting the species, and helping it thrive. Every time you look at an osprey nest and record one of these things, you're amplifying the value of your activity to affect basically every other osprey on the planet. So that's it.
Awesome.
Very
Yeah,
good.
I mean, that's pretty great. I mean, our challenge is collecting data that is accurate. I mean, that's one of the biggest complexities of, having people who might not have the experience like you have go out and collect data that is going to be accurate. So yeah, this looks like it's going to be really, really amazing. Thanks, Jim.
You're welcome.
Well, I see that we are just at noon right now. And as I've said in the past, since we want to respect everybody's time, if some of you need to drop off, don't feel obligated to stay on. We have a few questions, a few comments and observations, and maybe Ben, and
Take questions.
if you don't mind hanging in for a little while, we've got a few questions and a few observations. So, and
Yeah,
Darlene,
yeah.
are you on?
So I'm actually filling in for Darlene today. Oh, I think I hear her.
Yeah, I'm on. Thanks, Caroline. I'm not on camera though, Rick. I'm just in between travel. But hey, Caroline, either one of us can speak. And I really enjoyed this as actually just as a viewer and an audience member. I learned so much, Ben. I live very close to that Osprey camera. I'm on 29th Street in Park Light. But
Okay.
I'll just say,
know it well.
yeah, I do. And something that's coming to mind is how all these past events that we've had for Science Saturday are starting to come together. Last week, we learned a little bit more about My Coast, which is an app and a tool that helps people monitor flood levels. But there's a feature in that app where you can also report litter on the beach, including balloons. So you can imagine doing that project. You're helping to monitor flood conditions and report trash, which should help Osprey. You know, these ways of getting involved on the island, it truly is like a shared ecosystem. One thing helps the other too. So thank you, Caroline. Caroline's been putting in chat where you can find this project today, last projects the week before, and just want to encourage people to get involved in them because they all do relate. You can see from today's discussion too. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that that could be something else that would be interesting to see even an Osprey watch, where it's a box that could be checked, because we record that data when we go out and do surveys, whether there's plastic in the nest as well.
Yes.
So there you go, Jim, more work.
Yeah, I'm gonna chime in for just a second too. We have a speaker a little later on from New Jersey DEP later on in the month. And she's going to be talking about DEP major program to help avoid much of the balloon pollution. So everything is connected, and some of our speakers wind up connecting the dots for us. So that's another good one. And Ben,
And if anyone can't find the link in the chat, just let me know. It's right there, scistarter.org/LBIF-Science Saturday, where you can find the Osprey Watch and all these other projects.
And as I've said, those links are out at the session. So probably certainly by this time next week, and maybe even by Wednesday, if you go out to lbifoundation.org and you go to the science page and you scroll down and you go to the very bottom, then you will find the speaker and the links to their talk. And if we have a recording of the session, there's a recording there in case there's some things that you wanted to catch up on. So that's just a little reminder. And I don't know, Ben, did you have other things that you wanted to wrap up, or do we want to get into our chat?
I mean, I could show slides for probably another half hour if anybody wants to see them, but I'm happy to, if anybody has any questions they want to ask, they can feel free to ask. And my whole presentation too will be available as well too, as a PDF. So
that's great. And I'm looking in the chat and I see that someone mentioned that they have a bayfront home and they're interested. They have some riparian rights. By the way, I want people to understand, those of us who have bayfront properties have riparian rights, but you need to understand that they're in the state of New Jersey, the riparian rights are mainly there to protect you from someone building a bulkhead or something else that would go onto your area out in front of your house. You don't really own that to do anything with it. You can't have a shellfish farm, which I of course would love to. You can't do those things. You don't own that riparian right is not the ownership of the bay floor. So just kind of a word to the wise, if you do have riparian rights, there's not too much you can do with that. However, people who are interested in helping erect or have an Osprey tower erected on their property or an adjacent island or something like that, I noticed Ben said, please get a hold of me, and Ben's email address will be available to you, because that's where a number of the Osprey nests have come from, is from people that have land or access to land where they can be put. So I'll just kind of underscore that, and thank you for volunteering that to at least take that up with Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I just put a link in the chat, and that's where, if anybody would like to volunteer, to watch a nest or wants to learn more about it, once the new Osprey Watch website comes out, of course, we'll probably be doing some sort of training on it. But yeah, if anybody really wants to get involved, you could reach out to me.
That's great. Well, looks like we don't have too many other comments. So Ed, by the way, said, yeah, I understand what riparian rights are. Great. So I think we'll close things down for today. Thank you so much again, Ed and Northside Jim. I really appreciate this talk. We had around 30 people on at the beginning and around 30 people on at the end. So everybody hung in there right to the very end. I think that's always a mark of a great presentation, and we certainly appreciate that, and also appreciate some things that we can do and things that we can observe. So bringing those things up to our attention is very useful, and we want to thank you for that. So see you all next week. We're going to have Angela Anderson speaking, and one of the many different things that she's involved in is the field station down in Holgate that the Long Beach Township established. And I'm sure Angela will have a lot of information about that. So it'll be another fun, exciting talk. And I want to thank everyone for coming on. I want to thank the foundation again for hosting, and see you all next week. Bye.
Thanks, Rick. Have a good weekend, everyone.
Thank you, Rick, Ben. Thank you, Northside Jim. Have an amazing weekend.
Yep. Thanks, Jim. Yeah.
Thanks, Ben.